She laughed in my face. That's what I said to the mirror the night it happened. I stared at my own reflection like I didn't recognize the man blinking back. My hands were still shaking, my knees are still sore. My heart? Numb. All I did was try. All I did was love her. The restaurant had dim lighting, violin music playing, and a view of the river. I even booked a rooftop table weeks in advance, despite the cost. I practiced the speech in my head for days, repeating it until I memorized every pause, every word. I brought her to the edge of the skyline and told her she made my life worth living. Then I dropped to one knee and pulled out the ring I had designed, soldered and assembled by hand, a ring I built with a sensor that played her favorite melody whenever we touched. Stephanie looked at it like it was a prank. "You made this?" she asked, raising one eyebrow like she couldn't believe it. "Yeah," I smiled nervously. "I wanted it to be personal." She picked it up, turned it over in her fingers. I waited for the moment, the tears, the smile, the yes. But instead, she burst out laughing, loud, sharp, cruel. Other tables turned. "Oh my God, Michael," she choked between laughs. "You seriously proposed to me with a toy? This is copper, right? What is this, plastic?" "It's resin," I muttered, slowly rising from the ground, feeling the blood leave my face. "It's embedded tech, it synced with my embarrassment?" she snapped. "You thought this was romantic? What do I look like, a beta tester for your failed startup?" I didn't say a word, I couldn't. Her words burned hotter than the soldering iron I'd used to shape the base. I looked down at the ring in her hand. It had taken me 6 months to perfect. It was based on the first schematic I ever drew, when I was 16 and dreaming of building wearables that could carry emotion. And here she was, tossing it back into my palm like it was nothing. "Michael," she sighed, fixing her makeup mid-laughter. "I can't marry someone who doesn't take things seriously. This feels like a hobby, like you made me a gadget. I'm not a project, I'm a woman." "You're the woman I've loved for 4 years," I said quietly. "And that ring, it's the most serious thing I've ever made." She gave me that look again, the one she used when I forgot to pick up her dry cleaning, or talked too much about my prototypes. The look that said, "You're not enough for me." Then she stood up, grabbed her clutch, and walked out without another word. I sat back down in the chair and looked at the empty wine glasses, the untouched dessert, the flickering candlelight that suddenly felt too cold. The violinist kept playing like nothing had happened. The waiter walked by and awkwardly asked, "Sir, would you like the check?" I nodded, too hollow to respond. As I paid, I noticed Stephanie's phone buzzing on the table across from me. She'd left it behind. It lit up with a message from Willie. I recognized the name, her friend from work, the same Willie she said was like a brother. Willie. So, did the nerd propose with one of his machines? "Willie, you coming over after?" I slid the phone away. I didn't need more confirmation. I picked up the ring she'd laughed at and closed it back into the velvet box. Not to keep, not as a reminder of failure, but as evidence. Evidence that this pain had a birthplace, a moment, a laugh. She laughed when I proposed with a homemade ring. She'll choke when she realizes that same ring launched the company that made me millions. My name is Michael Reeves, and I used to believe love could survive anything, as long as it was real. I wasn't rich, I wasn't flashy, but I was loyal. I wasn't a guy who bought roses just because I messed up. I was the guy who learned to code in 3 languages just to build my girlfriend a custom calendar that tracked her mood, ovulation, favorite cafes, and playlist of the week, all because she once said, "I wish my life had one dashboard." That was Stephanie. We met during senior year of college. She was majoring in marketing, always sitting in the second row, always the one raising her hand in class. Confident, polished, magnetic. I was the quiet one in the back, scribbling on my tablet, hoodie zipped up, half my face behind a laptop screen. I still don't know what made her talk to me the first time, probably curiosity more than interest, but she said, "You always seem like you're building something. You ever build relationships?" I choked on my soda. That was Stephanie, bold, forward, effortlessly stunning, the kind of girl who knew how to walk into a room and make people turn. We started dating a month later. At first, we were good, really good. I made her laugh with dumb robot impressions. She listened to me ramble about circuitry. I took her to tiny hole-in-the-wall noodle bars. She dragged me to influencer pop-ups. We didn't fit, not at all, but we clung to each other anyway. After college, she got a job with a fashion PR firm. Meanwhile, I was working remote contracts for app security firms while trying to launch my startup. I was building LoopTech, a brand dedicated to emotional wearables, rings, necklaces, bracelets that could pick up subtle biofeedback and communicate emotion wirelessly. It was cutting edge, it was bleeding edge, it was unpaid. That's where the cracks began. Stephanie started dropping lines like, "Michael, we can't keep living like college kids," and "You really should be thinking about scaling, not soldering." She wanted to see me become someone like Willie, her co-worker. He had a car, I had a bike, he posted mirror selfies from a gym, I had wires and energy drinks scattered around my workspace, but every time I looked at Stephanie, I thought, don't lose her, not her. So I did things I never told anyone about. I sold my old gaming console, I gave up buying new tools, I slept 4 hours a night trying to finish a prototype that would impress her. Because if I could just show her that the ring I built could sense heartbeat patterns and play our song whenever we held hands, maybe then she'd believe in me again. I was a fool, but I was her fool. She moved into my apartment a year into our relationship. It was small, studio, no balcony, one window that faced a brick wall. But I painted the walls her favorite shade of pale pink and installed soft white LED strips around the ceiling just because she said it felt Instagrammable. I made space, I gave her the better side of the closet. She turned the living room into her makeup corner. My workstation got pushed to the kitchen counter. I didn't complain. Love is sacrifice. That's what I told myself. When she got promoted, we celebrated with takeout. I surprised her with digital flowers that bloomed out of a screen I built inside the ring box. When I got accepted into a tech accelerator, she barely looked up from her phone. "Cool," she said, chewing her salad. "So will this finally bring in real money?" I told her it wasn't about money. It was about changing how we connect. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "That's cute, Michael." Then there were the late nights when she didn't come home right away. She said they were work dinners. I believed her the first few times. Then the stories stopped matching. Her perfume changed, so did her lipstick color. Her tone got sharp, I got quieter. I started sleeping in my chair, not because we fought, but because we stopped talking, and that silence, God, that silence was louder than any argument we could have had. Martha noticed before I did. Martha had been my classmate and one of my only close friends who stayed in touch after college. She was an industrial designer and worked on high-end product aesthetics. We'd met for coffee a few times while I was working on my prototypes, and she'd help me refine the outer ring structure, smooth the material finish, and balance weight distribution. She never asked for credit, never wanted to be paid. "You look tired, Michael," she said one afternoon as I sat across from her, hollow-eyed, drinking room-temperature coffee. I shrugged. "Working late?" She raised an eyebrow. "Or crying into code again?" I tried to laugh, but it came out weak. She tapped the top of my hand gently. "You know love isn't supposed to hurt, right? It's not supposed to feel like a pitch you're constantly tweaking to get approved." That stuck with me for days. But I kept working. Because I was so sure that if I just launched the product, if I just made money, if I just became something, Stephanie would look at me the way she did when she first called me a genius. So when I booked that rooftop restaurant and finally knelt down with the prototype ring in my hand, I thought I was turning the page, starting a new chapter, securing forever. But she laughed. And in that laugh, I saw every sleepless night wasted, every sacrifice mocked, every tender moment we shared reduced to a punchline. I didn't cry when she left the table, I didn't even chase after her. I just stood there with the ring in my hand, feeling something settle inside me, something still, like a door had closed and locked. Later that night, I posted a video of the ring online, a soft demonstration, 2 hands touching, the ring glowing, music playing, no words, no explanation, just the sound of heartbeat tones sinking through the metal. I woke up to 38,000 views, and by noon, it hit 100,000. People were crying in the comments, couples tagged each other, a woman wrote, "This is what connection should feel like," and Stephanie, she hadn't messaged me yet. But Willie had reposted her story, a picture of the ring I proposed with, captioned, "When your man gives you Radio Shack instead of Tiffany's." They laughed, I created it. They mocked, I built it, and something told me they'd regret it. I wish I could say that night changed me, that I became cold and calculating the moment Stephanie turned her back and walked away from my proposal. But the truth is, heartbreak doesn't hit like thunder, it leaks, slow and steady, through the cracks you never patched. After the rooftop disaster, Stephanie moved out. She didn't even take everything. Half her makeup still sat in the bathroom drawer. Her robe still hung on the bathroom door. There were voice notes from her still saved on my phone, and I couldn't bring myself to delete them. One of them played on loop in my head. Michael, you're the most talented guy I know, but sometimes I feel like you live in a world only you understand. That was her way of saying you're not enough for me. Still, I waited for her to message me. I wanted closure, an explanation, even an insult. But days passed, then a week, then 2. She was silent. Martha messaged once. Heard what happened, I'm here if you need to talk. But I didn't respond. I wasn't ready to say it out loud. I was too busy drowning in code and rage. My viral video had hit 500k views. A brand called Pulse Nest reached out offering to license the ring design. I said no, not yet. I wasn't ready to hand over what I had bled for. I renamed the product Heart Sync and filed a patent under my name only. No partners, no team, just me, and maybe Martha, who quietly kept sending me updates on possible design upgrades even though I hadn't responded in weeks. Then came the day Stephanie reappeared. It was a Tuesday, random, normal. I was picking up some components from a local tech supplier. I turned around with a spool of wire in my hand and froze. There she was, standing across the aisle with Willie. He was laughing, she was smiling. Her hair was tied up in that sleek ponytail she wore when she wanted attention. Her hand was looped through his arm. I dropped the wire. Stefan. I saw me, her eyes widened, but she didn't look guilty, she looked amused. Michael, she said, as if we were two friends who hadn't caught up in a while. Willie looked over and gave me the same smirk he had in all his gym selfies. Yo man, he said like we were still boys. Heard your ring went viral, that's crazy. Stephanie tilted her head. You should have shown it to us before proposing, I might have said yes. Us. I turned to walk away without a word. Willie called out. Still working from your kitchen? Stephanie giggled. It burned more than I'd expected, because for a moment I forgot I was building a future without them. I forgot that they weren't part of the version of me I was becoming. For that 1 second, I was just the guy they left behind again. I went home that night and destroyed everything in my living room. Not the code, not the tech, just the couch we used to curl up on, the bookshelf where she once placed framed pictures of us, gone. I gutted my home of her memory like a virus. But pain has a funny way of turning into fuel. Over the next 2 months, HeartSync went from a concept to a full-fledged product. I rebuilt the ring with feedback from early supporters. I upgraded the resin gem with sapphire-infused casing. I built a pre-order site. Martha, despite me never asking, drew out 3 new concept sketches for a female version of the ring. When I finally responded with, "Looks good," she replied back instantly, "I never doubted it." Then came the betrayal I never saw coming. It started small, a weird delay in payment from the processor I was using, then a cease and desist letter. Apparently, someone had claimed that HeartSync infringed on an existing design patent. The name on the legal letter, Pulse Nest Inc. My eyes scanned the filing. They had beaten me to the punch by 10 days, filed a nearly identical patent, same ring, same embedded biofeedback. K-loop, same syncing function. Even the name Emotion Sync was barely different, and listed under their advisory board. Willie. Stephanie. I felt cold. It was like my lungs forgot how to function. Stephanie knew. She had seen my prototype. She had heard me pitch the idea. I'd shared the emotional syncing mechanism with her long before the rooftop proposal. She even wore the earliest beta version once, saying, "It tickles when it vibrates." I had laughed then. Now the sound of it made my stomach churn. She didn't just laugh at the ring. She stole it. Not just my product, my dream. I sat in the dark for an hour, blinking at my computer screen, trying to figure out how it happened. How the woman I loved could turn my pain into her profit. That night, I didn't sleep. I called Martha. She picked up on the second ring. "Michael? I need your help," I said. 2 days later, we filed a countersuit. We had everything we needed: timestamps, development logs, dated sketches, IP backtraces. Every component I'd used had receipts, every iteration was logged on private GitHub branches. Martha had saved early images with timestamps that predated the PulseNest patent. We had them. Legally, ethically, and emotionally, we had them. But still, it felt like acid pouring into my throat. I went quiet after that, shut off my socials, disappeared into my workshop. Until the betrayal bled into public. Stephanie, in her PR wisdom, started pushing interviews. She appeared on a live stream podcast titled Women in Wearables. I watched from the shadows as she spoke confidently about emotion sync, about the inspiration behind building a ring that could sense closeness. And where did the idea first come from? The host asked. Stephanie smiled like she'd practiced the line. From heartbreak, she said sweetly. I was once engaged to someone who never really understood me. I realized if I wanted something beautiful in life, I'd have to build it myself. I watched her wear the exact casing design I had handcrafted with Martha's help. Willie sat beside her, nodding like he knew what she was talking about. That was the night I realized there was no misunderstanding. This wasn't a mistake, this wasn't some blurred line. Stephanie had copied the very thing she mocked, and the worst part, the world was eating it up. They were receiving praise for a dream they never bled for. While I, the original architect, was in hiding. It wasn't just about revenge anymore, it was about reclaiming what was mine. I didn't eat for days, that's how it started. Not because I was starving for attention or sympathy, but because food felt like a luxury, like something you give yourself when you've earned peace. And I hadn't earned anything. Not after watching Stephanie parade around interviews like she invented my ring. Not after Willie, who once begged me for a $200 loan to buy fake followers, sat beside her, adjusting his collar like he owned the world. I stayed holed up in my apartment with the curtains drawn, screen glow burning into my eyes. Sleep came in strange doses, an hour here, 20 minutes there, but never enough. And every time I did drift off, I dreamed of her laughter. That rooftop laugh, high-pitched and slicing, echoing in my skull like broken glass underfoot. The worst part wasn't that they stole my idea. It was that they looked so comfortable doing it. Like my pain wasn't real. Like everything I ever gave, every blueprint, every night I sat next to her explaining what emotional feedback pairing meant, was just fuel for her next brand deal. I kept asking myself the same question, was she always like this, or did I turn her into someone cold by trying too hard to keep her warm? I'd stare at my workbench, still covered with broken tools, resin shavings, half-assembled PCBs. I couldn't bring myself to touch them. My own tools looked foreign. I started to wonder if I was delusional. Maybe I hadn't explained enough. Maybe I didn't document well. Maybe this really was my fault. But then Martha would message me. She didn't say much, just, don't let them write your ending. You built the storm, you can control the lightning. She doesn't get to define your legacy. Sometimes I left her on read for hours, other times I replied with nothing but a period, but every message reminded me of something I'd forgotten. I mattered before she noticed me. Still, something inside me had fractured, my confidence, my trust, even my drive. I remember the day I got the PulseNest investor sheet leaked to my inbox anonymously. Martha suspected it was someone from Stephanie's side, trying to flex, trying to intimidate, but all it did was deepen the knot in my chest. Line by line, I read how they valued Emotion Sync at $3.6 million in pre-seed funding. They had partnerships with wellness brands, influencer deals, even early manufacturing lined up in Shenzhen, and Stephanie, she was now the Chief Visionary Officer. That title used to be a joke between us. I once said I wanted to be one on my future LinkedIn. She laughed and said, that's not a real job. Now she wore it like a crown. I wanted to scream, not because they were succeeding, but because they were doing it with my heartbeat, my algorithm, my soul. And yet, I didn't move, I didn't rage publicly, I didn't fire back with a tell-all tweet, I just waited. It was Martha who dragged me out of the shadows. She showed up at my door one night with takeout, blueprints, and a flash drive. You haven't lost, she said, setting everything down. You've paused. I shook my head, voice barely above a whisper. I don't know if I can unpause this. Martha leaned back in my busted chair. Do you want the truth? No, lie to me. She didn't blink. You're scared of starting again because it means accepting what you lost. Silence. I didn't just lose her, I muttered. I lost who I was with her. Martha reached over and picked up the broken prototype on my table, the first ring, the one Stephanie mocked. You're still here, and this is still here. You haven't lost anything that matters yet. I looked at that ring, scuffed, faded, one of the sensors half exposed like a wound, but it still hummed when touched, still pulsed with the rhythm I programmed, like it was waiting for me to believe in it again. Daya. Tonight, I cried. Not loud, not messy, just sat on the floor, hands covering my face, and let it out, everything I'd buried beneath sarcasm and solder. And when I was done, I picked up my laptop. Martha stayed. She didn't ask questions, she didn't preach. She just sat across from me, tinkering with the old casing, her presence a quiet rebellion against the storm in my chest. The next day, I called my old manufacturer. Then the designer who once offered to help with packaging. Then I built a new brand. I called it Vain because emotion, like current, travels beneath the surface. And this time, I didn't design for her. I designed for everyone who ever loved quietly, everyone who gave too much and watched it get auctioned. Every underdog with steady hands and a loud heart. But even as I built again, I couldn't escape the tension that buzzed under my skin. What if they sued again? What if they buried me with influencers and money? What if the world never heard my side? What if I never got closure? The emotional weight wasn't gone, it just evolved. I'd lie in bed at 3 a.m., staring at the ceiling, listening to old voicemails I hadn't deleted. I didn't even know why I still had them. Maybe to remind myself how easily love could rot. In one message, Stephanie said, "I know I'm not perfect, but I believe in you, Michael, I really do." In another, "One day, you'll be something. I just hope I'm still by your side when you are." She said those words long before the betrayal. And every time I heard them, my stomach twisted with doubt. Was it all a lie from the start, or did I kill it by trying to impress her more than I tried to understand her? Either way, I knew I'd never get those answers. She had made her choice, and I was done asking why. But even as I moved forward, launched Vain, secured small batch orders, got real testimonials from couples, something inside me stayed frozen. Suspended in that rooftop moment, locked in that laugh. Because emotional betrayal doesn't just hurt, it rewrites your DNA. And the hardest part of healing is accepting that the version of you who loved them is gone. I thought I was finally rising. Vain had launched. Quietly, steadily, without flashy press or viral gimmicks. Just a landing page, a newsletter list, and a promise. Tech that listens to the heart, not the market. Pre-orders began trickling in, 10 one day, 40 the next. A reviewer on a low-profile tech blog called the product eerily intimate. Another user message saying her long-distance boyfriend cried when the Ring played their song at the airport. It was working. But the day everything turned again, it wasn't because of me. It was because of Stephanie. A new headline hit my inbox through an old Google alert I forgot to disable. Emotion Sync pulls out of Global Wellness Expo, amid lawsuit allegations. I stared at the headline, reread it twice, then clicked the article. Stephanie's smiling face greeted me first, cropped beside a grayed-out picture of the Emotion Sync ring. The article detailed that a former advisor had accused the company of intellectual theft and unethical misrepresentation of proprietary designs. They didn't name me, but they didn't have to. The lawsuit was from within. It was Willie. He had filed a legal motion stating that Stephanie had stolen the design not only from an ex-partner, but from him as well. Claimed she used his romantic ideation and brand proposal decks without credit. Apparently, now that the buzz was dying down and investors were pulling back due to lack of scalability, he'd turned on her to save himself. I laughed. Loud, bitter, poetic, really. Willie, the man who snatched what he never earned, was now trying to snatch it back again, but it got worse. In the middle of all that chaos, Stephanie reached out to me, not a message, not a call, a letter. Hand-delivered. Martha was the one who handed it to me. I'd been in the workshop all afternoon when she walked in, silent, eyes unreadable. "This came for you," she said. I took the somewheres. The envelope slowly, turning it over. Stephanie's handwriting. I recognized the cursive curves instantly. For a second, my chest tightened the way it used to when I saw her name light up on my phone. But it passed quickly. Old reflexes. I opened it. Michael, I know you don't want to hear from me, but please read this anyway. I'm not writing to justify anything, not anymore. I'm writing because I'm scared. Everything's falling apart. Willie lied to me about what he had filed. He didn't come up with the idea. I know that, you know that, but he has connections, and he's telling everyone I stole from him, that I manipulated him emotionally. It's a nightmare. My name is being dragged everywhere, and I know you probably think I deserve it, but there's something you don't know. I'm sick, Michael. Not metaphorically. Not emotionally. Really sick. I was diagnosed 2 weeks ago. Early stage lymphoma. And I didn't know who else to reach out to. I know what I did to you was unforgivable. I know I mocked the very thing that gave your heart meaning. I was cruel. I laughed, but I was scared too. I didn't believe in myself the way you did in me, and I projected that onto you. I chose comfort. I chose Willie because he didn't challenge me. Now I see he never respected me at all. He's abandoning me, just like the investors, just like my friends. You didn't deserve what I did. But I still remember what you said that night you proposed. I built this ring for one person only. That person wasn't me. It was always you. Please, can we talk? Just once. I need to tell you something in person. Stephanie. I set the letter down. Martha didn't ask what it said, but she saw my face. You okay? She asked softly. I nodded. Too fast, too hollow. The truth was, I didn't know what I felt. Anger, pity, some twisted kind of triumph. This woman had humiliated me, robbed me, repackaged my heart and sold it to the world, and now, stripped of her glitter, she was crawling back, battered, sick, alone. Part of me wanted to go to her, part of me wanted to show her the same grace I once begged her for. But another part, darker, colder, whispered, this is the consequence she chose. That night, I couldn't work. I walked around my apartment, stepping over discarded wires, unopened orders, notes scribbled in a rush of inspiration. I kept thinking about that line in her letter. The ring wasn't for me, it was for you. She was right. Every line of code I wrote, every pulse sync, every sensor, every melody cue, all of it came from my need to feel something in a world that kept taking everything. She just happened to be the person standing there when I tried to give it away. Now she was asking for time, for a conversation, for something I no longer knew how to give. But I agreed to meet her. Not because I still loved her, but because I needed to see the fallout with my own eyes. We met at a small cafe she used to like, tucked away, half forgotten. She looked thinner, paler, her once perfect hair tied back in a lazy knot, no filters, no lashes, just a woman facing herself for the first time in years. She looked at me like I was both a ghost and a mirror. I didn't expect you to come, she whispered. I said nothing, just sat. She reached into her coat pocket and slid something across the table. It was the original ring. My prototype, the one she had laughed at. I kept it, she said. Even after I laughed, even after I left. I clenched my fists. Why? She looked away. Because a part of me knew I'd never get anything that honest again. I picked it up. The sensor still flickered weakly when I held it. She continued. Willie's suing me. He's claiming I forged signatures, that I built a motion sync off confidential file. Is he helped draft? Did you? She smiled sadly. Of course not. He didn't do anything, just flattered me long enough to gain access, and I let him. Silence sat heavy between us. She stared at the ring in my hand. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I didn't want to leave this world without telling you that you were right. I studied her. This wasn't the woman who mocked me on a rooftop. This was someone who finally understood loss. I set the ring down on the table. You don't get to rewrite the past, I said. But maybe you'll survive the future. She nodded slowly. Will you testify for me, against him? I paused. Then said, I'll tell the truth, for the record, not for you. She smiled faintly. That's more than I hoped for. We parted without touch, without drama, just silence. but inside me, something shifted. The war wasn't over, but the battlefield had changed. And now, I knew exactly what I was fighting for. I stood in the back of the courtroom, watching as the final arguments wrapped up. It was supposed to be a simple civil case, Pulsenest versus Michael Reeves, counterclaimed by Michael Reeves versus Stephanie Lynn and Willie Carter. But nothing about it felt simple. The courtroom was cold, sterile, and yet I could feel the heat in my chest, slow burning like a furnace that never truly cooled. They were seated just 3 rows ahead. Stephanie, hair now buzzed short from chemo, draped in an oversized beige blazer, face pale but unreadable, and Willie, dressed in his best attempt at corporate slick, shoulders stiff, jaw locked, trying to look innocent behind tinted glasses. He hadn't looked at me once since the proceedings began. Stephanie had, not often, but when she did, her eyes didn't plead anymore. They didn't ask for sympathy, they only carried weight, like a person finally willing to face the storm she helped create. Today was my turn to testify. I stepped up to the stand, adjusted the mic, and breathed in. My lawyer asked routine questions first: name, profession, timeline of the heart-sink design, and when the first prototypes were developed. I answered plainly, no extra flair, no vengeance in my tone. Then came the question that changed the air in the room. Mr. Reeves, to the best of your knowledge, did Ms. Lynn or Mr. Carter contribute to the foundational elements of your patented ring design? No, I said without hesitation. They did not. Did you ever give either of them permission to use your designs, codebase, or emotional pairing algorithm? I looked at the jury this time, dead in the eyes. Not once. In fact, the only person I ever shared my full schematics with was Ms. Lynn when we were in a romantic relationship. As a gesture of trust. A few jurors glanced at Stephanie. She didn't blink, she didn't flinch. Then came the final blow. My attorney pulled up a screed and displayed 2 photos, one of my ring's circuit layout from 13 months ago, and one of Pulsenest's launch model. I didn't have to say anything. The symmetry was almost perfect. The courtroom murmured. Stephanie finally looked down. Willie. He adjusted his tie, his face began to crack, just a little. Then came the witness testimony. Martha stepped onto the stand. She walked differently than most people, shoulders straight, steps quiet, but you could feel her presence ripple through the room. She confirmed every detail, the early design stages, the mood ring calibration sessions we held in her studio, the date-stamped sketches, even the conversation where I told her I was going to propose to Stephanie with the prototype. And what was your response? The lawyer asked. I told him it was the most beautiful idea I'd ever heard, Martha said calmly. Because it wasn't just a ring, it was the entire relationship, the idea that love could be measured, not in carats, but in pulse and memory. I looked down, jaw tight. She believed in me before I believed in myself. After the testimonies ended, the judge adjourned the hearing and called for a 1-hour recess. I stepped outside into the courtyard, the cold air cut through my blazer like knives. I leaned on the stone railing, closed my eyes, and tried to remember the last time I felt peace. Footsteps approached. I opened my eyes. Stephanie stood a few feet away, arms crossed against her chest. You didn't lie, she said quietly. I never needed to, I replied. She stepped closer. Willie's going to lose everything, his reputation, his podcast deals, the crypto scam he's trying to cover, everything. That was always going to happen, I said. He built his career on mirrors. She looked up at me, her voice broke. Michael, when I first met you, I thought you were the safest place in the world, and that terrified me. I didn't speak. I didn't know how to be with someone who didn't want to own me or fix me or win me like a trophy. You just saw me, and I thought that made me small. Her voice trembled. But you weren't building a cage, you were building a home, and I burned it down. I finally looked at her. She was shaking, not from illness, from regret. I answered softly. I wasn't innocent either. I wanted to prove something to you. That I could be enough. That the world you wanted could be built with my hands. But love's not a competition. Stephanie wiped at her eyes. I'm sorry. I know, I said. There was a long silence. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small velvet pouch. "I found this in one of my drawers," she whispered. "I never returned it." She handed it to me. It was the prototype ring. The first one, the one I thought was gone for good. I ran my thumb across its rough edge. It still hummed faintly. I nodded once and put it in my coat. Then I said, "Goodbye, Stephanie." She didn't stop me this time, didn't call out, didn't chase. Because she knew the version of me who would have turned back was gone. Later that evening, the verdict was announced. The court ruled in my favor. EmotionSync's patent was revoked. Damages were ordered. Willie's assets froze. Stephanie was cleared of criminal intent, but ordered to formally forfeit any further claims on EmotionSync's technology. I should have felt victorious. But it didn't feel like a win. It felt like closure. And maybe that's stronger. 2 months later, I was invited to speak at the Global Tech Compassion Summit, first time the words tech and compassion actually belonged in the same sentence. I brought Martha with me. Not as a partner, not as a co-founder, but as someone who seen me in pieces and stayed to hand me glue. As I walked up to the podium that day, looking out across hundreds of faces, I reached into my pocket. I pulled out the prototype, held it up, and said, "This ring was laughed at, mocked, forgotten, but I didn't build it to impress someone. I built it to prove that real connection can't be bought, it has to be built." They stood and clapped, but in that moment, I didn't hear the applause. I heard my own heartbeat, steady, clear, free. 6 months passed. In that time, the world moved on from PulseNest's scandal. Willie quietly deleted all his accounts. Rumors said he tried to start a YouTube channel for redemption storytelling, but it never got past episode 1, something about poor lighting, worse storytelling, and a flood of dislikes. His podcast sponsors pulled out. The emails stopped. The world, it turns out, doesn't stay loyal to leeches. Stephanie, meanwhile, had disappeared from the spotlight. After the court ruling, she sold her condo to pay off the legal damages. I didn't ask where she went or how she was doing, but one day, I received an anonymous delivery, a journal, a black leather cover, my name embossed in gold across the corner. Inside was her handwriting. No introduction, no apology, just entries, raw, unfiltered, dated from the months she was gone. She wrote about her cancer treatments, the sickness, the silence that crept into her life once the attention faded. She wrote about the nights she couldn't sleep, not from chemo, but from remembering my voice in the silence. She admitted she used to scroll through old photos of us, watching her own smile fade post by post, wondering when exactly she lost the version of herself that once believed in building things. I closed the journal gently and filed it away. Not as a keepsake. As evidence that closure doesn't always need a door slammed, it can be a whisper behind a closing curtain. But I wasn't looking back anymore. I was looking forward. Vane had grown beyond what I imagined. What started as a single ring evolved into a full emotional wearable suite, necklace pendants that responded to shared memories, bracelets that glowed during long-distance calls, earrings that pulsed with your partner's laughter. We launched a campaign, Feel What Words Can't Say. Sales exploded. Not because it was trendy, but because people were tired of filters, of fake feelings. They wanted something real. Martha stood beside me through it all. One night, at a product launch dinner, a reporter asked, "So who inspired the idea of turning emotions into wearable tech?" I glanced at Martha, then said, "Pain did, but loyalty made it last." We never defined what we were. But some things don't need names to be true. She never pressured me to talk about Stephanie again. Never asked what the journal said, never once hinted that she expected something in return for standing by me. Her loyalty was quiet, unshakable, carved from patience. And maybe that's what real love feels like, not explosive declarations or grand gestures, but sitting next to someone on your worst days and not flinching. But even after all the growth, after all the wins, I had one more card to play. One last thread to tie off. And I did it the day Forbes' Next Tech called Vane the most emotionally intelligent startup of the decade. I posted a single video on my personal page. No background music. Just me, holding the original ring, the one I had made by hand, the one Stephanie once mocked. I built this ring when I was broke, I began. When I thought love meant sacrifice without boundaries. I proposed with it, got laughed at for it. Then they tried to steal it. I paused. But the thing about building with your own hands, people can't replicate the part you bled into it. I smiled. This ring made me millions, but more importantly, it gave me back my voice. To anyone who's ever been mocked for dreaming too small, for loving too deeply, for giving too much, this win is yours too. I ended the video by placing the ring in a glass display case. The caption, "From laughter to legacy." It hit 5 million views in 2 days. People began messaging me. Not just tech enthusiasts, but survivors. Of betrayal, of heartbreak, of business failure. People who had been used, discarded, laughed at, and still found a way to build. And then came the final message I didn't expect. It was from a burner email. Just 3 words. "I'm proud, Michael." No signature, but I knew, and that was enough. Some scars you don't erase, you engrave them into your armor. The last time I saw Stephanie was 8 months after the case ended. I was speaking at a university panel on ethical innovation. She was in the audience. She didn't approach me after, just stood in the far back, arms crossed, wearing a simple beanie over her buzzed head, eyes glistening. I nodded once. She nodded back. It was the goodbye we never gave each other properly. No drama, no speeches, no apologies, just 2 people who loved wrong and learned the hard way. After the panel, I returned to the car. Martha sat in the driver's seat, scrolling through emails. I slid in, letting the door close gently. "You okay?" she asked. I nodded. She was there. She paused, then put her phone away. "Did she say anything?" "No," I said. "She didn't have to." We pulled away from the curb. The city lights reflected in the glass. And for the first time in years, my chest didn't ache, my fists weren't clenched, my thoughts didn't wander to what could have been. They stayed here, now, with me. Martha turned on the radio. A familiar lyre melody played, my melody. The one the ring had once used to pulse when 2 people touched hands. I looked at her. She didn't say a word, just smiled. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a new box, smaller, sleeker, refined. She blinked, surprised. "You're not kneeling, are you?" I chuckled, "God no." Then I opened the box. Inside, 2 rings, one for me, one for her. But this time, they weren't embedded with music. They weren't coded to pulse. They didn't need tech, just gold. And time. And choice. Martha looked at me, eyes full. Steady. I said, "Let's build forward." And she slipped her hand into mine. Not because she completed me, but because she reminded me who I'd been all along. Strong. Quiet. Unstoppable.